Every time prices rise, you lose a little more of your freedom. Groceries, rent, fuel, everything climbs quietly, month after month. And if your paycheck feels smaller than it used to, it's not your imagination. You're watching the oldest, quietest wealth transfer in human history. A transfer that repeats generation after generation. Because inflation doesn't just make things more expensive. It decides who owns the future and who rents it. Welcome to Financial Timeline, where money, power, and history collide. And nothing is ever as simple as it looks. To most people, inflation feels like chaos, prices exploding, savings shrinking, the system spinning out of control. But to the people who run the system, inflation isn't chaos at all. Inflation is order. It's how governments pay for wars without raising taxes. It's how corporations erase their debt. It's how the wealthy watch their assets multiply while everyone else scrambles to keep up. The question isn't why inflation happens. The real question is why it's allowed to happen. Again and again and again. To understand that, you have to go back to a time when inflation was treated as a national emergency, not an economic goal. In the early 20th century, major economies were tied to gold. Every paper note was backed by a physical piece of metal in a vault. Money was scarce. Money was stable, and governments couldn't print their way out of mistakes. If you ran a deficit, you raised taxes or you admitted defeat. Inflation. That meant war. That meant disaster. It meant someone had lost control. The idea that governments would one day target inflation on purpose would have sounded insane. Then everything broke. The Great Depression shattered the world's monetary discipline. Prices fell. Wages collapsed. Banks died. Not because of inflation, but deflation. Money became more valuable every day. People stopped spending. Debt became unbearable. The economy froze. It was an economic death spiral, and it forced policymakers to rethink everything. By the end of World War II, nations were drowning in debt, some owing more than double their GDP. They couldn't pay it back honestly, so they didn't. They let inflation do the work. Throughout the 1950s and 60s, inflation quietly melted away impossible debts. War bonds, once worth fortunes, evaporated in real value. The world learned a lesson. A little bit of inflation solves problems no politician wants to admit. Then came 1971. President Nixon ended the dollar Isolene to gold. It was supposed to be temporary. It wasn't. For the first time in modern history, the world's reserve currency was backed by confidence, not metal. You could exchange dollars for more. Inflation wasn't a mistake anymore. It became a design feature. From that moment, money could be created in infinite quantities, as long as people still believed in it. Governments could borrow forever. Banks could lend forever. And investors learned the new rule of the game. Savers lose, borrowers win. Because inflation quietly flips the logic of money. Hold cash, you're punished. Hold debt, you're rewarded. Own assets, you get richer. Inflation doesn't just shrink debt, it multiplies wealth, but only for people who already have assets. That's not conspiracy, it's math. Inflation doesn't just raise prices, it decides who gets rich first. When new money enters the system, the people who receive it earliest benefit the most. Centuries ago, it was kings and merchants. Today, it's central banks, hedge funds, and corporations. By the time money reaches ordinary people, it's already done. This is known as the Cantillon Effect, the invisible hand that pushes wealth upward. Inflation doesn't reward effort. It rewards position. After 1971, inflation became the glue holding the system together. By the 1980s and 90s, central banks perfected the illusion of stability. They promised 2% inflation, a number that sounds safe, scientific, harmless. But 2% inflation means the value of a dollar is cut in half every generation. And while grocery bills double, the wealthy watch their assets double because inflation makes debt predictable. And the people who benefit most from predictable debt are the people who own everything. Inflation is not their enemy. It's their business partner. In 2008, the global financial crisis should have been a reset. Instead, it became a blueprint. Central banks created trillions to rescue the system, not by sending money to citizens, but by inflating the value of stocks, bonds, and real estate. Those who owned assets recovered instantly. Wages did not. Then, in 2020, history repeated, this time through a pandemic. Governments pumped money into a broken supply chain. Prices exploded. Inflation hit highs not seen in 40 years. And once again, the wealthy won the most. Not because they were greedy, but because the system was designed that way. Inflation doesn't create winners. It amplifies whoever already has leverage. Look at any inflationary era. Weimar, Germany, post-war Britain, 1970s America, the 2020s. Different stories. Same result. Savers lose. Owners win. The middle gets hollowed out. Inflation is the most respectable form of wealth transfer ever invented. It's not corruption. It's not mismanagement. It's structure. The global economy is built on credit expansion, and credit expansion cannot survive without inflation. If inflation went to zero, the system collapses. Deflation freezes spending, crashes banks, destroys borrowers, reveals every hidden weakness. So the war on inflation is mostly theater, a balancing act between credibility and necessity. Central banks raise rates just enough to look serious, but never enough to break the machine. Because inflation isn't a glitch. Inflation is the operating system. Inflation doesn't just change money. It changes people. It trains society to spend now, fear, saving, chase, risk, borrow to survive, and speculate to feel alive. It punishes caution. It rewards leverage. And it creates the perfect citizen for a debt-driven world, always spending, always chasing, never secure. Inflation becomes a culture. 10. Habit, then a belief. We call it growth. Inflation isn't random. It's how power measures time. It rewards those who live in the future. The borrowers, investors, asset holders. It punishes those who live in the present. The earners, savers, and workers. And it forgets those who live in the past. The people who still believe money holds its value. That's why the rich love inflation and you don't. To them, it's not theft. It's strategy. Every generation learns the same lesson. Money's value is never fixed. The only question is, are you the one losing value, or the one deciding what value means? Inflation isn't a fire. It's the oxygen, and the world we built can't breathe without it. If this gave you a new perspective, hit subscribe. History has the answers. And here, you'll learn where to look.